All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Hi, I'm Matt Hill with Start9. I'm one of the co-founders, current CEO, and co-developers of StartOS. StartOS is Start9's, I shouldn't say Start9's, it's everyone's. It's an MIT licensed Linux distribution built atop Debian, but it is a far cry from Debian. StartOS is a server operating system that enables a normal computer literate person to own and operate a personal server for the sake of self-hosting any form of open source software and opting out of third-party intermediaries, custodians, and clouds. Okay, so that's just an introduction to me, Start9 and StartOS. I'm here to talk about Noderunners as a political constituency of Bitcoin, both from a high level, and then we'll zoom in all the way to how to engage in this political activity if you so choose. You don't have to think of it as political activity, but it inherently is, and we'll get into why that is. So first thing, to lay the backdrop, there are arguably, this is up for debate, but I have not had anyone successfully argue against this, there are 5 political constituencies of the Bitcoin network, meaning these are the 5 groups of people that have political power in Bitcoin and can help shape Bitcoin's future as they see fit. Number 1 are protocol developers, right? The most powerful of these are Bitcoin Core. So Bitcoin Core developers have political power, right? They write the code, they review the code, and they, to a degree, determine which features or BIPs will be included in Bitcoin's future. Number 2 are miners. This is one that most people would readily jump to conclude are a political constituency because they are the ones that determine which transactions make it into blocks and, you know, through proof of work can control Bitcoin's future by basically brute forcing their opinions, as we saw in the past, have been attempted at times, and they have been thwarted at times, but they are definitely hold political power, probably more than they should at the given moment. Another are exchange operators, so the on-ramps and off-ramps, with people need to get into Bitcoin, and they need to, at times, for very practical reasons, get out of Bitcoin. And so those who control the on-ramps and off-ramps, likewise, get their seat at the table. They get to decide, to a degree, what is and is not Bitcoin by basically threatening to block the on-ramps and off-ramps. Next are wallet developers. These are the developers and companies that build the client software applications that we call wallets. Without a wallet, can't use Bitcoin. And what features those wallets support or do not support will in large way determine how people use Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is. So again, wallet developers get their seat at the table. Their voices will be heard because they can mess with us if we do not take their opinions seriously. And the last group is Noderunners. These can be individuals, families, businesses, large corporations, doesn't matter. If you own, operate, and use a node for legitimate economic activity on Bitcoin, then you have political power. You have about as much political power as you would have in any kind of republic. You are one vote of many. However, the activity of your node carries weight. So for instance, if thousands of people are using your node to engage with the Bitcoin network, you are effectively an elected representative because you are voting on their behalf. If you are using your node for your own activity on Bitcoin, you are voting for yourself, right? One node, one vote. But there are people in the world who are running nodes that thousands and thousands of people use. Oftentimes, it's the same people as the wallet developers. So they're double dipping, okay? So somebody develops a wallet, deploys it to iOS and Android. You download that wallet and you begin using it to transact with Bitcoin. By default, you are connecting to the Bitcoin node that is owned and operated by the wallet developers. So not only are you relying on them for the code that they included in the wallet, but you are also relying on them for access to the node. Most wallets, any wallet that we recommend, allows you to swap out the back-end node for your own or for another node of your choosing. If your wallet does not allow you to swap out the back-end node for your own, you probably shouldn't be using it. They are roping you into a decision where they are now hosting the node that you use, which means nothing you do is private, absolutely nothing. They can see everything that you're doing, your balances, who you're transacting with. They can censor it. They could even lie to you. And I'll get into that in a second here. But anyway, these are the 5 branches of government is one way to think of it. Another way is 5 political constituencies, basically means the same thing. It is an innovative form of governance for the modern era. The checks and balances are very powerful. The game theory between these various groups, we've already seen play out in a few political battles over the years. Expect more to come. If you want to, well, next slide. What is a Bitcoin node? Okay, I'll get to what I was about to say on the next slide. What is a Bitcoin node? This is a short list. It does other things as well, but these were, the 6 that I felt were most important to go over in an introductory talk like this. Number 1 is transaction verification, right? I guess you could title this slide, "What does a Bitcoin node do?" Okay, so it verifies transactions. What that means is that it checks them against the consensus rules of the network for what is and is not a valid transaction, all the way from its encoding to whether or not the inputs are available to the person, trying to spend them. So depending on the consensus rules, different transactions may be considered valid or invalid. Secondly, it does block verification. So every time a new block is found, it is sent out to the network, and every single node on the network independently verifies the validity of that block in the same way that it independently verifies the validity of every transaction. This is to keep any malicious block from getting into the blockchain. Peer management. Nodes can explicitly connect to certain peers. They can explicitly ban certain peers. So for instance, if a peer sends me a transaction, and that transaction is invalid, I am going to assume that that peer is malicious, because otherwise they should not have sent me that transaction. So I ban them, and I tell everyone about this as well, and hopefully the network bans them in one fell swoop. So anybody who tries to cheat gets banned from the network instantly. You can also explicitly connect to certain peers that you trust. Otherwise, it's randomized. Your node will randomly select peers and connect to them. And these peers can change over time, but you can lock some in if you want. Mempool management. Your node keeps its own copy of a mempool, right? There is no such thing as the mempool. That's a common misconception, that there is this universal, everyone agrees on the state of the mempool, and that's not the case. Every node maintains a set of transactions that have not yet been included in a block, but are candidates to be included in a block, meaning they are valid transactions that just have not been discovered in a block yet. And you can tune your mempool in a variety of ways. You can say, I want it to store every known transaction, or you can just say, I only want to store a couple thousand transactions at most. And then your node will store the ones that it thinks are the best candidates to be included in a block. You can also tune it to exclude transactions that have excess data, right? This was a big thing when the ordinals were coming about. There were and are a lot of people who view ordinals as spam, sort of invalid activity on the Bitcoin network. And you can tune your mempool to basically exclude these things. Now, if other people are not excluding them, they are still eventually going to find their way into a block. So you're not enforcing your beliefs on the network, you're merely stating them. And if enough people agree with you and everyone were to tune their mempools to exclude these things, then it would be more difficult for these transactions to find their way to a miner. There would be less routes to a miner. And at the extreme case, if everyone tuned their mempool to exclude these types of transactions, then they would have no way of getting to a miner except manual delivery. So, somebody who wanted to create one of these transactions would have to like email a miner friend of theirs and be like, hey, put this in the next block. Okay. So tuning your mempool is, a semi-effective way to kind of vocalize your opinion about what is and is not a valid transaction without actually changing the consensus rules of the network. It's more influence than a rule, right? You're just helping nudge it in one direction. Nodes perform what's called flooding. This is when your node receives a transaction and successfully verifies it, it will then send it to all of its peers, right? And that process is called flooding. It does the same thing with a block, right? Whenever your node encounters a valid block, it will then send that valid block to everyone it knows. And that's how transactions and blocks propagate. Lastly is broadcasting. So when your node receives a transaction, whether it receives it from another node or from a wallet, it automatically is going to verify it and send it to everyone it knows. So if you want to get a transaction into the network and eventually into a block, you need to hand it to a node. That's the only way. The other way is to hand it directly to a miner. Like again, actually like calling your miner friend and emailing them your transaction signed, they can then put that into a block. But aside from the analog way, the way that you get your transaction into the Bitcoin network is to hand it to a Bitcoin node. It's almost like handing it to a post office, driver, postal worker, and just knowing that it's eventually going to make its way to its destination. Okay, so that's what a node does. It does a lot of other things. These are the high-level important ones. Okay, so why run a Bitcoin node? One is independence. You can independently verify transactions and blocks without having to ask anyone anything. Whoever is running the node is the person that decides if a transaction or block is valid. So if you're running your node, then you decide. If you're using somebody else's node, they decide for you. And if you trust that person, it's no big deal. Okay? But you should choose who you trust, and you should be very careful with those decisions. If you trust nobody, run your own node. If you trust your best friend or a family member, you can use their node. It's no big deal. You are still outsourcing your voice and vote to that person, but if you trust them, then maybe that's what you want. Number two is censorship resistance. When you run your own node, nobody can deny you access to the Bitcoin network. Again, if your node is a postal worker, then you have a personal postal worker that at any moment you can hand your transaction to, and they will dutifully distribute it, flood it to the rest of the network. If you don't have your own postal worker, well, you need to hire somebody else's in order to get your mail delivered. So we don't see this very often, if ever, at the moment. But for example, if you're using your wallet's built-in node, and that wallet company or team was given a mandate by a government that said, hey, this person, if they try to spend anything, you block them, then they would have to do that. And they could do that. So the only way to guarantee access to the network is to run your own node. We don't see that kind of blatant censorship quite yet. And the last one is voice. So as I mentioned, because the nodes are the things that are verifying transactions and blocks, they're essentially the things that are enforcing the consensus rules of the network. Anyone who runs a node is, in effect, declaring what they believe the consensus rules should be. And so in a soft fork scenario, or God forbid, a hard fork scenario, it is in part the node runners that are going to determine which fork wins. because they're going to choose which fork to follow. Obviously, the miners have a role here, the wallets have a role here, but the node operators do too. And we saw this very clearly with the user-activated soft fork in 2017 for SegWit. It was the Noderunners who banded together and declared that they would support the SegWit soft fork, and they did that by upgrading their Bitcoin node software to the software that supported SegWit. And there was enough of them that the miners got terrified that they were going to be forked off the network, that if they didn't follow the fork of the people, that they were going to end up mining blocks with Bitcoin Cash in them, as opposed to Bitcoin. And so they folded and followed the people. It was a very clear demonstration very early on in Bitcoin's history of the power of the people, so to speak, of the economic node operators. If they collectively bargain, right, if everyone agrees and upgrades their software, then we're almost forcing the other constituencies to come along. Now, they have their own weapons, and that's good because we don't want the node runners to have runaway power either. Balance of power is the goal. So your node is your vote. Okay, that's it for the slides. Now, what I want to show you, at least in part here, is how to run a node. So as I mentioned, first, are there any questions? That was a lot of high-level abstract stuff. Then we can get into some more practical how-tos. Go ahead. So your node, by default, the Bitcoin Core software comes with hard-coded nodes in it in the form of IP addresses. And when you spin that node up, it is going to reach out to those IP addresses in order to learn about other participants on the network. Then your node will befriend them, potentially dozens of them, such that any transaction those things receive will be sent to you, and any transactions you receive will be flooded to them. And if any of them ever lie to you, you ban them and you never talk to them again. You effectively kick them out of your life. And as I mentioned, you can prematurely ban somebody. You can create a list of IP addresses that just says, that person ever tries to talk to me, I don't want to talk to them. And you can also create a list of whitelisted IP addresses where your node will always attempt to reach that peer if it can. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, like you talking about banning? Like if a node is getting banned? I mean, banning is as simple as you lied to me, I'm never talking to you again. Right? And nobody should talk to that guy. That's what banning is. And so it's like you can still run your node. It's going to keep running. Nobody's going to talk to you. You've just been isolated. You've been put into a corner. Yes.
So the mempool management, like if you were to log in mempool.space, so then are you saying that that's a node and they're just broadcasting the URL so we can all look at it?
Absolutely.
Is there other similar user interfaces? If I want to run a node, I'd be able to see.
You can run your own mempool.space. So mempool.space, the domain, okay? So if you go to https mempool.space, is a mempool server, okay? Like picture it's an actual server. It's a large one in their case, a rack server that is running the mempool space software. And what that software is doing is it's indexing addresses and transactions to an enormous degree. It's basically looking at every single piece of activity on the Bitcoin network and creating indexes of it. It's a data aggregation monster. And then it represents that data through a graphical interface, which is what you see on the screen at mempool.space. So what you're seeing is all the data that their mempool software, not mempool in Bitcoin, right? It's an unfortunate naming convention, right? So mempool, the company, mempool.space, the software, is not Bitcoin. It's a separate piece of software that looks at the blockchain and does all sorts of analysis. It also is a full node, right? So it's connected to a Bitcoin full node. I shouldn't say it is a full node. It's connected to a Bitcoin full node. And the mempool settings on that node are cranked up to the max. So mempool, the company that operates mempool.space, maintains a massive Bitcoin node that has the largest mempool in the world. Basically, every known transaction they know about. Their mempool is like the biggest, okay? Whereas your personal node that you're running at home, you don't need to know about every transaction at every moment, right? All you care about are the ones that you care about, the ones that your wallets need. But mempool space, because they're providing this service to the general public, they maintain everything. And so that's why they have the best fee estimations, right? To estimate fees, the more transactions you know about, the better you can estimate the fee for getting into the next block. And so mempool.space has pretty accurate fee estimations because they're aware of every possible transaction that's looking to get it included into a block. Mempool space, the software, is open source software, which means anyone can run a copy of it on their own server. So instead of going to mempool.space, you could go to mymempool.com. Let's say you owned that domain. You could go to mymempool.com and visualize your mempool in the same GUI, the same graphical interface that mempool.space does. Now, yours might look a little different in terms of fee estimations and transactions because your mempool does not match their mempool. But if you were to crank yours up to the max, then it would look identical. So I can show you this, actually. We could do it right now. All right, any other questions? Go ahead.
You said that there is really censorship happening over, right? Or not too much, but is it because it's harder to do it on the kind of, the Bitcoin protocol level, then it's much easier to like keep people out of cages, or is there kind of an easier way?
Yeah. So it is very impractical to censor at the broadcast layer because there's so many ways to broadcast, right? It'd be like if one postal worker was just like, oh, I'm not supposed to take mail from you. Then you just turn to another postal worker and they're like, okay, I'll take it, right? So it's very, very difficult to censor somebody at the edge of the network. It's a lot easier to censor them at the miners because there's so few miners compared to node operators, right? It's like 100 to 1 or more. And so if you're a government, you're going to go to the large scale mining operators and be like, don't let transactions from that guy in, right? And even easier than that is to censor the exchanges, right? Where you can't necessarily prevent somebody from transacting in Bitcoin, but you can absolutely prevent them from getting back to their fiat currency, which in a way might be a blessing in disguise because it, reduces the ability and need to go back to fiat. I wouldn't put anything past the U.S. government. I mean, like influence is influence. It doesn't adhere to borders all the time. But it's not just the U.S. government. It's anybody with power, right? Like Bitcoin is about sovereignty. It's about being able to do things without asking for permission or being denied access. And if everyone is using Bitcoin in a custodial intermediated manner, then it doesn't achieve that. Right? The extreme case would be that, let's say there's one miner in the world and one node operator. There's a single giant Bitcoin node that everyone uses to send, receive, and verify transactions. That would just be Chase Bank's database, right? Like it's no longer Bitcoin. Bitcoin is only decentralized insofar as people are running their own nodes and using them.
I don't know if you want to get into the weeds with this, but as far as the peerless banding, what's that movement work for like civil DDoS attack somebody by like sending peers that
Yep.
they have to ban and reduce their ban?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, denial of service is, a
I mean, you could set your notice to say, hey, any invalid transactions, I have to ban this person.
Mhm. Yeah, but yes. Anything that is publicly addressable can be denial of service attacked. That whether that's a Bitcoin node or my website, right? If somebody's out to take your server down, they can do that without some degree of rate limiting, firewalls. And Tor is a great way around this because Tor has denial of service protection built into the protocol. You cannot denial of service attack somebody on the Tor network. So if your Bitcoin node is running as a Tor hidden service, a .onion URL, which all of ours do by default, they cannot be denial of service attacked. Correct. You can't propagate. It's being onion routed around the world, and the protocol has denial of service protections built into it. If it sees too many going, the network will halt them. So Tor's pretty cool. It sucks in a lot of ways, but it's also it's like the escape hatch. It's the fallback in case all things go wrong with the public ClearNet. We fall back to Tor and we're bulletproof again. Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think they do. I think that you share with your peers if you encounter a bad actor. But I don't want to say that authoritatively because I don't know, because that also raises a concern where I could lie, right? Like you're a good actor, but I tell everyone you're a bad actor and suddenly you're banned. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't. Maybe everyone just does banning on their own. It would effectively achieve the same thing, because if node A is malicious and they broadcast a transaction to 8 nodes and all 8 nodes ban them independently, it's effectively as though they all shared that information. So my guess is that's probably how it works, just because it makes more sense, but I don't know for sure. Okay, cool. So let's say after all of this, you're like, okay, I want to run a node. Okay, I want to have independence, censorship resistance, and maybe a little political power. Okay. Let's say that's attractive to you. How do you do it? So most people run Bitcoin Core software. That is the most popular and common Bitcoin implementation or software that adheres to the Bitcoin protocol. There are others. An extremely popular one that is rising in popularity very quickly is Bitcoin Knots. This is a fork of Bitcoin Core produced by Luke Jr., and it has different mempool policies. It has different RPC APIs. Yes. Knots, like KNOTS. Has different mempool policies, primarily designed to reduce spam. Luke is a heavy believer that the ordinal stuff is total spam and trash and needs to be filtered. It also has additional RPCs so that wallets can get information from the node that you can't get from a Bitcoin Core node. The point is that there are many implementations of the Bitcoin protocol, and as long as they are all adhering to the same consensus rules, you can run any one of them and be a valid participant on the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin Core is the go-to that most people run. And so all you have to do to run a Bitcoin node is download a copy of Bitcoin Core or Bitcoin Knots or BTCD, or there's a few, and run it on a computer. And it will automatically do the whole peer discovery, and it'll sync the blockchain from scratch. And then it'll verify transactions, it'll broadcast transactions, it just does it. That's what the software does. You download it, you install it, you run it, and ideally you do it on a server, not on, like a laptop that you're going to be turning on and off, because when it's off, your node is a non-participant, right? You turn it back on, your node catches up and can participate again. But properly speaking, Bitcoin is a server application, meaning it should run 24/7, 365 with a constant internet connection. That is the ideal. So how do you download, install, configure, and run a Bitcoin node, a Bitcoin software? Bitcoin Core, at least, and I believe Knots, offer builds for almost every major distribution operating system. So you can run Bitcoin on Windows, Mac, multiple Linux distros, even Raspberry Pi specific builds are supported. And so which operating system you choose to run Bitcoin on is really your user preference, right? Some people really want to run Windows and install Bitcoin on it and use that as their always on server. I highly recommend against that. Windows is garbage for a variety of reasons, but Linux is usually the go-to operating system for server applications, right? Most businesses and individuals that run servers are doing so on some flavor of Linux. StartOS is our flavor of Linux. It is a unique and novel form of Linux because it takes, when people think of Linux, they think of two things. This is meaning it's useful background, so give me a quick tangent here. When you think of Linux, you think of one of two things. You're either thinking about Linux, the client operating system, like Ubuntu, Debian, right, where you install it onto your laptop, and it has a GUI. It has a desktop, and has folders, right? It's basically like Windows or Mac, except it's a Linux distribution. That is Linux being used for a client device. If you want to use Linux for a server, you don't get a GUI. You get a command line. You open up the command prompt terminal, and you put on your Linux systems administrator, IT professional hat, and you begin entering command line commands, following complex GitHub READMEs in order to install, run, and configure the various server applications you want. That's Linux for server. And it's the same for Mac and Windows as well. If you want to use Mac or Windows as a server, you are out of the GUI and onto the command line. So basically, the only way to run a server in the world today is to have command line experience and skills, right? This is called Linux systems administration. It's a highly paid profession that takes months, if not years, to master. So nobody's going to do it, okay? Very few people. And even the people who do know how to do it, it still is time consuming and very frustrating at times. So what we have done, what we set out to do 6 years ago and are now making very good, starting to get there, is a Linux distribution that takes the entire command line experience and brings it into a GUI so that a normal person can, effectively administer it. And that's kind of unique. That has been attempted once or twice, but nobody has really done a good job of it. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it's really hard to do. I can vouch for that personally. Two is nobody cares, right? So there just wasn't a lot of demand in the world for a Linux server operating system GUI because everyone just outsources their servers to Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. It's like, why would I be a sysadmin server operator when I could just tell them to do everything for me? Well, the reasons are becoming rapidly apparent why that's not a good practice and why humanity has really gotten itself into a pickle here with computing infrastructure, okay? It's very dangerous, the state of computing on Earth right now. And so there's increasing demand, rapidly increasing demand we're witnessing for people to run their own servers instead of constantly accessing and using servers that are owned and operated by third parties that do not in any way have your interest in mind. And so there's demand now from non-technical, yet computer literate people who want to run a server. And I would argue that StartOS is probably the best graphical server OS ever made. And it's getting much better all the time. And in fact, we are coming out with a major, our biggest release ever, hopefully this month. So, stay tuned for that. What you are looking at here is not that version. Okay, well, you're looking at a hybrid. You're looking at the old version with a few of the new features in it that I purposely just kind of put together here to demo a couple of things since the new one is not fully ready yet. So I'm going to show you how to run a Bitcoin node right now. So first of all, I just logged in, okay? I logged into this server. This server, this SOS, which is Start OS, not help me. It's an unfortunate acronym. startos.start9.pl is a domain that is owned, and the server is operated by one of my coworkers, partners in Poland. So this is a server, a physical server, this big, that's sitting in Poland somewhere and is serving its graphical interface on sos.start9.pl, and I'm accessing it from here. This is part of the new features that are coming out with the new StartOS, is this seamless, easy, clear net access. Okay, so I'm in here. I'm going to go to the marketplace. Cool. I'm going to get out of the alpha registry because that's dangerous. And I'm going to go to Bitcoin. So this is our marketplace, right? Lots of cool things you can install on your server. But let's go to Bitcoin. It's going to be slow. One, because the internet connection here is slow. And two, this is in Poland. Also on a Starlink rural weird thing he's got going on. So hopefully it's not that slow. Come on. Oh, we're going to give it a second. Hold on. Something's wrong. Oh, that'd be a bummer. Oh, yeah, it's a lot of data, the marketplace. It's like a huge data dump, but I did not expect it to be this slow. It's normally instant, like if it's on a good internet connection and domestic. Yikes. Yeah, it's always internet, though. It's always the problem. Conference internet trying to connect to Poland. Should have known better. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Well, the same is a nuanced question. So all Linux is effectively the same at some level, which is the kernel, right? But other than that, we have very little in common with other Linux distributions. The main difference that you're observing is that when I run Linux, if I run Ubuntu on my laptop, that is serving a graphical interface right on the computer, right? This is being served through the browser. This is a web app. So our StartOS is not meant to be used with a screen. It's a headless server, right? It's just a computer on the shelf, and it serves its own website, private website, that you can access from any browser and log in. This just isn't going to load, guys. I'm really sorry. That sucks. Yeah, network error, data details. Yeah, it's actually erroring. There's something. It's like fundamentally just. Yeah, it's just fundamentally failing to connect. So I don't know why that is. You connect to the community. Yeah, it's not going to load. That's a shame. For anyone who is interested, you can come by the booth, and hopefully I can get this faster, or honestly, probably be better off even just connecting over Tor to my own node. I don't have ClearNet set up on mine. So anyway, yeah, the GUI is served as a web application through the browser. By default, it is served on a unique .local URL on the LAN. So if you're connected to the same local area network, you can access your server at a unique .local URL. If you are away from home, you can access the website via a unique .onion URL using any Tor-enabled browser. Those are the two out-of-the-box hosting that are produced. In the next version of StartOS, the one that's imminent, there are two additional ways of reaching not only your server, but any service that's installed on that server. And that is one via VPN. So we have WireGuard now built in to the operating system with a really cool one-line script. So you get a VPS somewhere, DigitalOcean, AWS, doesn't matter. Go get a $5 a month VPS, the lowest powered thing you can find. And you'll see it with Debian, whatever. We recommend a particular version. So you flash, Debian onto it. And then come over to StartOS and say, connect. You'll run a script. It'll ask you for the root password to the VPS. And it'll remotely, install all the things that it needs to and create a tunnel such that now you can host domains, host your services on ClearNet, right? On like a ClearNet domain, mydomain.com, or in this case, start9.pl. And all the traffic will be reverse proxied through the VPS, thereby exposing the VPS's IP address to the world. So you can host websites, blogs, e-commerce stores, your Bitcoin node, your Nextcloud instance, anything you want from your home on the public internet without exposing your IP address to the world and without doing any router configurations whatsoever. Okay, and it's all done through a one-line script that you paste into the StartOS. It's what? It's WireGuard under the hood, yep. Yeah. The second way to do ClearNet in the next version of StartOS is if you don't want to rent a VPS and spend the $5 a month, and you don't mind exposing your home IP address to the world, you can also just forward specific ports on your router, and StartOS will create firewall rules to either allow or disallow inbound traffic based on the domain it's attempting to reach. So if you want to, you can, for free, host your Bitcoin node, Lightning node, anything you want from your server on the internet. You just have to go into your router and create a port forwarding rule, which is pretty easy to do and pretty standard across most routers. So there's kind of two trade-offs there. One is $5 a month and works out of the box and obfuscates your IP address. The other one is free, almost works out of the box and exposes your IP address. It really just depends on your threat model and preferences. Also, you could just do private VPN access to the server. So if you didn't want to host it on the public internet, you can go to your router and turn on the VPN. Most routers support VPN servers these days. So you turn on the VPN server and then StartOS, effectively giving you remote access to your LAN, and you access it on the .locals or the IP and port, just like you would if you were on the LAN. So all that is simple and clear in the next version of StartOS. But today, it's LAN or Tor. Kind of sucks because Tor is super slow. Yeah, this just isn't going to work. I'm very sorry. That sucks. All right. I think we're pretty much out of time anyway. We have a booth over here. Unfortunately, fortunately, we sold all our devices today. So if you were interested in getting one of our devices, we don't have any. I did not expect to sell out today. So that's cool, but also sucks. So what we're doing is we've created a discount code for the conference, which is just BitBlockBoom, all one word. So if you want to buy a server from us, just enter BitBlockBoom. You'll get 15% off, which is the largest discount we would ever offer because we don't have huge margins to begin with. And it'll be valid for the next couple of days. That purchase comes with a warranty of the hardware and a lifetime membership and access to our support server, which is private. It's not on Telegram. It's not on any public thing. It's a gated wall where you can come in and be safe and not be attacked by spammers and scammers that we staff 18 hours a day, so that if you have any question about StartOS, your server, or anything on the server, you get one-on-one help from one of my personally trained technicians 18 hours a day. So that's why you would buy a server from us rather than getting your own mini PC and flashing StartOS, which you could do. StartOS is free and open source Linux distribution. So have your fun with it. But if you want to support us and get support from us, you can buy a server from us. Okay. All right. Thanks.